Hi, this is Don Allen, and what we're going to talk about today is the concept of impossible problems. Mostly what we mean by this are problems that have impossible solutions. You may think that any problem that you can pose, the mind can solve, a la Sherlock Holmes, but this is not so. The mind is fully capable of posing impossible problems to solve. These problems include those you cannot solve, problems that change when you try to solve them. We'll see more on this later. Problems solved on the basis of past knowledge, problems involving a change of scale, and problems about systems exhibiting memory. So let's proceed. We have a table of contents on impossible problems. That is definitions, categories, sources, creating impossible problems, and solving them. Well, we can't solve them, but we'll talk about solutions. But before that, we should begin with the really nice problems that actually have a solution, and they are in the domain mostly of the physical sciences and particularly mathematics. Let's begin with the well-posed problem. In mathematics and other sciences, there has evolved the concept of the well-posed problem. It has three components. A solution exists, the solution is unique, and the solution's behavior hardly changes when there's even a slight variation or change in the initial conditions. That is, the conditions that create the problem, or the conditions at which the problem starts. A problem not well posed is often called an ill-posed problem mathematically. But this also applies in other systems, political, economic, biological, sociological, and the like, psychological, and those problems are rarely called ill-posed. They're just problems. A problem has a solution in terms of our past recollection, if and only if there can be posited a resolution to the situation that is essentially irrefutable, except by rejecting the premises applied. So this sort of implies, it terribly implies that you set up your premises and then you apply logic. Solutions must be obtained upon them, obtain their merit upon the clarity of their reasoning. Clarity of the reasoning. This is something we all seem to try to imply when we're making an argument to our colleagues and friends. Steps toward the solution must follow an accepted path with a no hidden information suggested or interjected. So if you're analyzing your friend's solution, keep this in mind. Is new information being added, or are new premises being suggested? So a solution is considered unique if there's only one, when no other solution meeting the criteria of a solution can be constructed using the same data. These are the clean problems, often associated with the sciences, but rarely so in the real world of human interaction. A well-posed problem is one wherein small changes, keep this in mind, this will affect us later, in the incoming data result in small changes in the solution or the output data. Of course, many problems in real life do not comply with this concept. Here lies the many issues of complexity which we will take up in this lecture. Let's look at the definition of an impossible problem. We got to have a definition in order to go on. An impossible problem is one that has no solutions, perhaps multiple solutions, or partial but incomplete solutions, complex solutions, incomprehensible solutions, incomplete data, and semantics. And this is often where the paradoxes arise. But paradoxes are very subtle, and they can arise in any of the above. Examples of impossible questions. Just a few. You can make up your own. Is this or that opinion true? For example, is Keynesian economics true? Does there exist a God? Are there ghosts? Is there a soul? These are all questions that basically rely on an opinion or faith. Another is, has man caused global warming? Namely, is global warming an artifact of natural processes, or is it anthropogenic, namely man-made? Paradox type questions. You know, you've heard of the one, on an island there is a barber who shaves all those that do not shave themselves. Who shaves the barber? This is a paradox type question. It has no answer. It was posed originally by Bertrand Russell, and it is of the semantic variety. There's also another type of impossible question. They're vague questions, and we'll get to those in a future lecture. Here are some more. Which is better? Which is true? In the absence of precise criteria, you can come to impossible questions. Like, for example, what will happen if? Is what we think true or actually true everywhere? For example, is the speed of light, which is posited as absolute through the universe, is it the same in other parts of the universe? Can we know this? We cannot know this. This is impossible. At what point do we reach the micro from the macro? This is the so-called heap paradox. Suppose you have a heap of marbles, a big bunch of marbles all piled up, and you withdraw them one by one. When does that heap become a mere assortment of particles, of marbles? Okay, the heap paradox is a very important type, and it certainly highlights the micro to macro or change of scale type problem. And another type is, are we working with a model? Models, you know, are very fashionable, and they're created for almost everything nowadays. And so if we're working with a model and we answer questions with a model, does it apply to the situation at hand? Namely, is the model valid? What are the factors in impossible problems? For no solutions, the problem at hand has no discernible solutions. Which is the better color, red or blue? Do you know? It's impossible. Should we go to war on the basis of humanitarian rights violations? This is a contemporary problem that we see frequently in numerous countries, and It's basically impossible. We have to make assumptions and then get a consensus. But nowhere in the game is there truth, or nowhere in the game is there solution. Another is, does a current food stamp problem lead to job growth? Well, there's one camp that says yes, or another camp that says no. Do the merits of a Mars landing, that is landing people on Mars, equal the cost of doing so? This is a cost-benefit type problem. No solution is there. One must assign a solution. Here are the sources of impossible problems, and we're going to look at just one of them today, which is system complexity. There are also stability issues, conflicting information issues, quantum effects, self-organization, fundamental constants, which we indicated later, say, for example, the speed of light, but there are others. The macro to micro or micro to macro transitions, also the whole spectra of political, economical, religious, and societal issues. There are also impossible problems associated with data mining and with semantics, and it is in here we see the paradox. Actually, the problems with our language create problems throughout all of what we're discussing. Complex systems. This is our topic of the day. Few of these systems are fully scientific, much less mathematical. Most of our complex systems involve many factors. For example, our society is a complex system. A bioecosystem is a complex system. International relations is a complex system. So they involve many factors, including political, economic, sociological, biological, and more. And all complex systems combine analytic, logistic, and tactical actions. As well, and very important, are the intuitive and inductive factors. These are parts of the way our brain works, our brain thinks, and our brain arrives at solutions. Let's look at complex systems. There are open and closed systems. Too many problems are regarded as arising in and confined to closed systems. In fact, many problems are not closed, contained, but rather open, meaning it is a problem that continually interacts with its surroundings and environment. Solving such open systems and problems without an encompassing view can lead to a cascade of systemic failure. Namely, if you address only the solution of one aspect in one of the complex of systems, it could cascade into a failure of the other systems. Closed systems, on the other hand, are basically in-the-box systems where what we do is confined often to the small box in which they are addressed. Closed systems are the easy ones. Open systems have problems. The next point is nonlinearity. Complex systems offer us the nature of nonlinear responses. Assuming that a measure of this facet or that, in this level or that, may result in a proportional response is often really incorrect. In fact, a small change in one aspect of a system and its potential solution may create very large scale results in another direction. Hysteresis. This is the dependence of a system not only on its current environment but also on its past environment. The dependence arises because the system can be in more than one internal state. Note that, more than one internal state. But this is one thing most of us understand. In a complex system, you can have several internal states simultaneously. To rely on solutions based on the past environment, that is, to use old folks, or I shouldn't say old folks, but experienced folks to solve a problem, they will often rely on a variation or an interpretation of the problem as an old problem, but the problem has changed. So, in fact, they will produce a solution to the old problem, but the system has changed and the results may differ. On the other hand, with memory, if you just take the young person and ask them to interpret a solution or create a solution, they may not know how the system has remembered how it behaves under certain conditions, namely problem solutions. Remember, problem solution is an effect upon a system. Consequently, the young person may not appreciate this memory and may treat the system as fully new, not realizing the system as a memory. Scaling is a really important factor, and that is many complex systems range over numerous scales of action. While the effects between scales may not really be obvious or apparent or even strongly considered, they are part of the grand system. These interact to an extent with the micro-macro scale, but in a fully integrative manner. The last point in complex systems is feedback loops, and that is simply said, if you affect a system, it feeds back within the system and changes the system. This is extremely important. This means that actions at one time alters the system at future times. So assuming the system is static is incorrect. The system is dynamic and it changes, and if you affect the system trying to make a solution to some problem, you may change the system and then the system will not respond in the desired way. So, in summary, many types of impossible problems abound. This brief lecture considers only a few examples. In fact, focuses on just one type of impossibility, and that is complexity. Creating impossible problems. Why do this? Well, we want to consider problems and problem solving in a holistic way and not just in a simple school context. An algebra problem or a geometry problem. We want to look at the spectra of types of problems. They involve thinking outside of the brain or outside of the routine of the brain. And just because the brain can pose a problem, it certainly doesn't mean it can solve a problem, and that is absolutely a fact. It's easy to create impossible problems. In a future lecture, we'll create a whole bunch of them and show you how to create them.